conflict for a while.
Okay.
Are we ready? Okay. My name is Rick Leaf. I'm Chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. This open meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29th, 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Act allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely, so long as readable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Call the roll now. Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Amy, we know, is not with us tonight. Millie, I didn't see Millie yet. Ashley Davies.
Here.
Tracy Camarano will be joining a little while. Fran Backstrom.
Here.
Jean Kennedy.
Here.
Jean Cahill.
Here.
Rick Leaf is here. John Campbell will be joining later. And Jen Tolman.
Here.
Okay, let's move on to our agenda this evening. First item is to get an update from Jean Cahill on what's going on with the letter we sent to the Conservation Commission. Really, we sent the letter to the conservation agent who's been in contact with Jean and Lori and Ashley, and maybe Jean can bring us up to date on what's been happening since we sent that letter to Vinny, the conservation agent. So go ahead, Jean.
Great. So Rick, on behalf of us, the MPIC sent a letter to Vinny Vignali, conservation agent for Northborough. He shared with them the master plan goal NCH1 to evaluate the removal of obsolete dams in order to facilitate habitat restoration and waterfront access. And in this letter, Ashley had added information to the draft that was last circulated to you all, and her revisions included information on federal and state agencies assisting with dam removal projects and listing sources of grant funding. And I just wanted to also bring your attention to the updated MPIC matrix for this goal, which indicates that we have been in preliminary discussion with Conservation Commission, and that they have contacted DEP for appraisal of dam removals. And I'm not sure if this should be DER because of something I learned this in the last week, which was that Vinny shared a presentation. I was able to attend a webinar, and this was on a history of dam removal success, a case study of the Shawsheen River restoration. And that was led by the town of Andover's conservation agent and the state DER, which is the Department of Ecological Restoration. So I'm not sure if that's who Vinny has been in contact with about pursuing this agenda or pursuing this this goal. And anyway, this presentation was really super informative. I have the slide deck from it. It was led by our own former Mia McDonald, conservation agent for Northborough. She is now working for the state Mass DEP Wetlands. And she and the people from Andover gave the story of this these two dams that were taken down in Andover in 2017, a small dam and a large dam. One was public, one was private. Really interesting histories at both of these locations. And they talked about the whole process of how they were able to work together, and multiple partners, nonprofits, state agencies, federal approvals, all of this, how that all came together. They only really stressed the positive of, just how it worked out, although it was very difficult at times. And interestingly, they had a small dam, which was owned by the town via eminent domain, which was problematic. And the small dam was just very small, very ornamental. That its only purpose was ornamental, but it had been the site of a fatality where a boater was caught in the turbulent flow underneath the water overflow. And so that's kind of another, thing for us to be thinking about in terms of public safety, that can happen, but that was certainly gave some wind behind the sails of removing that dam and another dam on the main stem of this Shawshene River. So the Shawshene River, like the Assabet, is part of the, ultimately enters into the Merrimack River. And the Shawshene is close enough to the estuary that is to the saltwater end of the river that there is actually a restored herring flow due to the removal of these dams. And so they were astounded actually by the speed with which the river health recovered once the dams were removed. And they gave more information I won't cover, but one other thing that came up this week was at a Northborough Rotary meeting. We had a presentation by the American Red Cross Central Massachusetts Disaster Preparedness Manager, and he mentioned dams as a particular threat that is unique. It is one that Central Mass has in its potential disaster that could strike here. And he cited the Leominster Dam failure. That was a publicly owned, town-owned dam. It had been rated structurally deficient and in poor condition for the past prior 16, 17 years. Nothing was done to improve it. There was no enforcement action around it, but the dam did breach during excessive rainfall in September of last year. And another kind of footnote to that is that Mr. Calvani said that Leominster had been denied FEMA funding in its initial round of seeking disaster relief because the town had not followed through and documented any dam maintenance. So I think those are all just kind of interesting factoids for us to keep in mind as we continue to pursue this project here in Northborough. I haven't heard anything back from Vinny since then. And I assume, I didn't see that it was on Conservation Commission's last meeting, but I assume it will be coming up in front of the commission when they have time. So
I think,
that's,
was there an email from Vinnie Jean that they weren't able to get to it at the last meeting? So he was moving it to the next one. I thought that
oh,
was the case.
I
Maybe
didn't
not.
see that.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of something else. Okay.
It wasn't on the last meeting agenda, so maybe it was mentioned. I didn't attend the meeting.
Okay, got it. I also wanted to mention that town of Ipswich just voted at their annual town meeting last week to take down the dam in the center of their town. So that'll be a project we can follow as well. It's much larger than the river, through their town is much, much larger, wider. The dam is pretty significant. But it'll be, interesting to see.
So I don't know what our process is going forward. Like we've kind of handed it off to the Conservation Commission. I'm sure Vinnie reports to Lori, so she would probably be able to apprise us of further developments as this dam exploration continues.
Yeah, I think that we ought to, as a follow-up item, keep an eye on this and, Lori, to the extent you do have any information about what's going on through Vinnie or the Conservation Commission, you can update us. Same thing, Gene, if you want to sort of keep your eye on the Conservation Commission agendas, see what's coming up there if you feel, that you want to, provide some input or speak at one of those things. You think there's something our committee ought to be doing, you can sort of let Lori or I know when we can bring this back on an agenda. But if nothing else, maybe in a couple of months, if we hadn't heard anything, we can put a follow-up item on our agenda just to check in with Vinnie, see what's going on. Any questions or comments for Jean before we move on here? Go ahead, Julian.
So Jean, do we know who owns our dams? Has that been established yet?
You're on mute.
Both of our main stem dams in the downtown area are privately owned, but we do not, I haven't looked into ownership and I don't know, I assume that can be complicated in some cases. Who owns the land, who owns the actual dam may not be the person who owns the adjacent land. So that would be the quest of whoever takes responsibility for moving this forward.
So, I mean,
Uh,
not that you would name names, but just because it was mentioned a while back that we might not even know who, if they might be privately owned, but it'll be difficult to find out who owns them, and they might not even know they own them.
Right.
It's
This,
my
I mean,
understanding that all of the dams are privately owned, which really makes it difficult. So in order to remove the dams, they would first have to be taken by the town by eminent domain. So I'm not sure what the appetite is for that, other than also another possibility is to advocate for grant money that could potentially pay to remove the dams. Because the average person doesn't really have the financing to be able to afford to remove a dam.
It's also, they bear the liability and they're supposed to be insured and they're supposed to be maintained. And one of the things I didn't go into was that whole jurisdictional issue, but it really is in the property owner's interest to remove the obsolete dam because otherwise they could be subject to loss of life suits, loss of property. In the case of Leominster, it blew out, house foundations, people didn't have flood insurance. And so it's in their case and in other cases, private dam owners have been located or have been approached and have been really willing to work on the removal. So that was the case for the higher of the two dams at the Shawshene River. It was an assisted living facility, and they were gung ho to work on the removal.
yeah, it's
And
pretty
save
common
money in
for
the long
them.
term.
It's pretty common for them to be privately owned, and an organization like ORS would be the ones that would oversee the removal and get the grant funding, and it wouldn't have to be taken by the town. If the town wanted to be in control of the project, yes, but as a partner, it could, could be that ORS is in charge, and they just work in conjunction with the owner, who is probably usually going to be happy to have it removed unless they have some hydropower income, which I don't think any of these dams are hydropower.
No,
So
in
if,
fact,
if we were able to supply the owner information for these dams, would ORS just reach out to the dam owners directly and kind of leave the town out of it?
I think it can happen any number of ways.
Yeah.
The town would be a partner for, I'm sure, applying for funding. But
I
they
think
could
it,
initiate the whole process and project manage it.
so ORS worked with Berlin recently, or is working with them right now on a privately owned dam removal, right close to the town line up on Whitney Street. So I'd be curious to see how that process is going. We could probably talk to ORS about how they went about that. Because I know the town has had some involvement, but I'm not sure to what extent.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, do some legwork on this to help, fill in gaps, especially with, an outside agency, an outside nonprofit like that. So Lori, I guess I leave it to you and Vinny to kind of give your, at least, give your views and help us, take this to the next step. So I don't want to step on any toes by, making dam removal master plan initiated process if it really isn't in our committee's lookout to do that.
Well, the thing that I'm curious about is if they have been successful in the past, ORS, I mean, they would be far more knowledgeable than the Conservation Commission about how to go about removing a dam.
And I,
So they would, since they're the experts, and the Conservation Commission is already very busy with permitting, and they're volunteers. Granted, there is Vinny. Vinny is constantly on the go doing site visits. So if they have the capability of doing it, we're happy to provide the ownership information, assuming we can find it. And then I'd say, ORS just go at it and let us know what they need from us.
so I can talk to them if you all, think that's appropriate. I can call ORS and initiate that discussion.
I guess my only question would be, to what extent does the town need to authorize this work to go forward, even if the town ends up not doing it? Does either the Conservation Commission or the Select Board or both of them have to authorize that a project be started to do dam removal on the Assabet River? And then from there, the decisions are made as to who other people that actually go ahead and do the work. So my only question would be, before we get too far down the road with oars, I'm not sure who this goes to, whether, Lori, this is something you can discuss with Tim or with the select board or with Vinny, but do we need, we did our job in terms of bringing this forward. I don't think that we have the authority to actually authorize oars to go in there and remove dams. So my question would be, what's the next step?
Because
have the
these are
town authorize
privately
it?
owned dams, then this would really be between the property owners, so the dam owners and oars. So the problem is that the Conservation Commission can't order these dams to be removed. The town doesn't own these dams. Eventually, of course, there would have to be a design for the removal of the dam, and then that would have to be permitted by the Conservation Commission. But we're not even to that point, because right now we don't know if the dam owners are interested in removing the dams.
Well, let me phrase the
So
question
that's step number one.
Let me
Approach
phrase the
the,
question. Let me phrase the question differently then. Supposing a private dam owner decides they want to remove their dam, do they have to get some authorization from the town, either the Conservation Commission or the Select Board, to go ahead and do that? If we just find out someday that one private dam owner got in touch with oars and, unbeknownst to us, one of the dams on the Assabet River disappeared and we knew nothing about it?
no, the Conservation Commission would have to approve the dam removal.
So one way.
So the first step is to contact, in my opinion, I have never been involved with a dam removal. But I would think that the first step would be to approach the property owners to see if they're interested in removing the dam. So that's step number one. Step number two is to get the funding to design the removal of the dam. And then step three is permit the dam removal, and step four is actually remove the dam. So, right now, of course, the Conservation Commission has I don't know about the individual members, but they don't have any experience with the dam removal. So oars does have experience, so they would likely be the most appropriate organization to contact the property owners so that they would be able to answer any questions that they might have about process and benefits and risks. So I think that if we're interested in moving the project forward, having an expert on hand is probably key, like oars.
All right, as long as permitting is step 3 and not step 1 or step 2, I understand that. I would think that my thought would have been that before the thing gets too far down the road and grant funding is approved, that there was some agreement between the owner and the town that this was allowable to be done and had some amount of permitting. I would think the authority providing the grant funding would want to know, has this been or will this be permitted before they agree to release funds to do the work?
The Conservation Commission is the approval authority, so they're not the design authority.
I understand
So
that.
the Conservation Commission is going to be looking to the dam owner. They're going to say, hey, you want to remove a dam? How are you going to do it? What are the risks? What's the design? So they're going to be asking all the questions. So the town doesn't typically provide that answer. So they're going to be looking for an engineer to supply those answers. So
But
that's why I'm saying that there has to be a design.
So there is, I think, funding from the state for the feasibility study that they would likely get and probably what would happen. And I don't know this for sure, but my understanding is that ORS would probably talk to the dam owner and the town and get all of the stakeholders involved in the process ahead of time. And there may be a way that the town can help with signing off on a grant application for the feasibility study or something along those lines. I actually do think DER sometimes does those studies for the dam owners free of charge if they're on some kind of list. So
They're on a priority list. So
yeah,
first step
so-
to go through a process of becoming of qualifying as a priority project.
Right. So ORS would be the ones to tell us, where could the town help in this process?
Yes.
But I think we'd probably be a partner from the beginning, and like you're saying, it'd be the Concom. So I think the first step is that, we talk to ORS and they lead the process and they let us know what we can do to help move things forward. And that's the
Yeah,
role
I
we
mean,
play.
I think that the Conservation Commission would be happy to help, but they probably won't know how they can help.
Right.
So, yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
So who's going to make the contact with ORS? Is that going to be Gene or Ashley or you, Lori, or Vinny, or how are we going to take the next step?
I have a meeting coming up with ORS for another reason, so I can talk to them about their process when I meet with them, if that would help.
All right.
That would be great.
Sure.
And if you want to set up a meeting, Ashley, so maybe me and Vinny and you can meet with yours folks, so we can all kind of hear the process.
Rick, Fran has had her hand up.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Fran has her hand up.
Oh,
I'll
no.
just answer Lori's question. I
Not
when
gonna
I
wash
meet
any
with
hands.
them, I'll start the conversation and then we can try to have a follow-up meeting. That sounds good. Okay.
Okay, Fran, go ahead.
It's okay. Thanks, Julianne. I don't think I'm the only person either out here in, the virtual world. I find it really fascinating, but can you explain when we keep referring to privately owned dams? We really mean like the land in which the dam has developed on the river, or they actually own what was created?
They own what was created. So they own the structure itself.
I thought some of them were like more naturally developed. These are not. These were actually purposefully constructed dams at some period in time. And that's why it's hard to know who owns them, because the property may have passed on through the normal selling process, and the new person who owns the underlying property doesn't realize that they either own it or it never transferred with the house.
They
Fascinating. Okay.
become most complicated if they're under roads. So that's when it's really like, oh my God, is this owned by the mill that constructed the dam, or is this part of the public right of way? So those are the biggest sticky wickets.
But
Thank you. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I've come across a few landowners in my work where they inherited a property and then they get a call from DER that says this dam is defunct. You need to address it, fix it, or remove it. It could be millions of dollars, and these people have nothing and a pile of estate taxes. They're like, what do I do? How do I get rid of this? Can somebody help? So I think that happens more often than you think. And then yeah, and the state's been really cracking down on trying to get rid of these dangerous dams that are about to fail. So,
So for example,
I thought we were only talking about like beaver dams, to be honest with you. I
No.
didn't realize we were talking about concrete.
So for example, the Allen Street Dam was probably built by whoever built that factory, whatever is used for one day to provide water power for the combs or whatever they made in that factory. And eventually
Baskets.
that changed hands. For a while it was Basketville. They owned it. They probably owned the dam when they owned Basketville. And now it's basically what the condominiums or apartments or whatever they are. If they're condominiums, then does everybody who owns one of those units own a piece of that dam? I mean, if that dam passed along from the people who built the factory to the people who did Basketville to now this residential building, probably the ownership of that dam reverts back through all of those ownership transfers. So if in fact
I
there are condominiums over there, could be interesting. How many
when
people actually own that dam?
when you own a condo, you don't own the land around it. So there's some kind of property owner that still owns the land. You know what I mean? That's probably who owns it. And they
It's
probably
usually
don't have
the
anything to do
condo.
with it.
It's
Huh?
the condo association.
Condo association, yeah.
So everybody who is a member of the condo association technically owns it.
So in this situation, if in fact that dam was seriously considered to being removed and ORS got involved at some point, the condo association would have to take a vote to see if they agreed as a group to have that dam removed, because as a group, they own it now.
Yes, I would think
Something like
so.
that. Okay, well, I think we've sort of covered this enough. I think at this point, Ashley, if you're going to go ahead and set up this meeting, it might make sense to bring this back on the next month's agenda, just get an update as to what's going on in the last month, if anything, about this kind of thing. I
Can
think
I
we've
just
all
say
learned a
one
lot more. Go ahead, Julie.
before we end this topic, back to your point, Rick, of, where do we start and who starts this whole thing? I think as we're working with ORS, simultaneously, we have to figure out who owns these dams, because we're going to get nowhere until we get that information. And it sounds like this might be a really complicated deed or whatever it is. And so would that be the tax assessor? Who would know who owns? Who can?
Well, in some cases, it might be fairly obvious. But where I'm not sure of all these locations. If a dam is located over by a road crossing, that could be complicated. So yeah, I guess we just have to see how obvious it is and then reach out to the assessors. Of course, they have the deed information. I regularly go on the registry of deeds and look. So yeah, it shouldn't be too difficult to find out. If it is muddy, then that will likely not be our starting project. So
It can
it would
be,
be easier to go after the low hanging fruit. So
it can be taken by eminent domain through a process of attempting to reach and not, and that's what they did with one of these Shawshene River dams.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the eminent domain taking can be controversial, because then it's a matter of the taxpayers taking on the expense of removing the dam. So right now they have no responsibility. If they take the dam by eminent domain, now all of a sudden the town is responsible. So I know, like with gas stations, I would never recommend that the town buy a gas station, because there's a huge amount of environmental liability.
We just
with,
did,
gas
called
station.
Pierce.
You're
Okay,
right.
I think we've covered this enough tonight. Okay, so we'll see where this goes, and it's kind of good information to help us as we try to launch other issues here as to what it is we're unleashing on the town as we move things from the master plan into some stage of reality. All right, so we'll bring this back next month and get an update from Ashley and Jean and Lori as to what's happened since this meeting. So let's move on to something a little bit more esoteric and pleasing, which is downtown beautification. I think Julianne and Lori have made some good headway over the last few days with this. So I don't know, you want to start, Lori, and Julianne can chime in as what's going on with these things?
Sure. So we now have 12 planters, which were planted yesterday. So we ended up getting $600 worth of plants from Cavecchio's. We went with 3 different designs this year. So put a little variety in. So of course they look pretty sparse right now, having just been planted, but hopefully they will grow to be impressive within a month's time or so. So there were 7 volunteers, including Julianne and Amy. So I want to thank those who helped out with the purchase of the flowers as well as the planting. It was a very, very, very hot day. So it was definitely work. So thank you. But check them out. We have 8 planters on Main Street, starting from the Northborough House of Pizza, right next to the railroad tracks, and then over by the Electronic Message Center. And then, of course, we have the 4 on the Church Street Bridge. On Main Street, they go down as far as the Common.
Do we have one on the traffic island at Church and Main Street?
We do.
Oh, cool.
Yes, that's the one that we're a little bit nervous about. Hopefully, nobody will see it as a target and aim for it with their vehicle.
You said besides labor, did some people make personal contributions towards the purchase of the plants?
No, I paid for it, but 2 ladies, Amy and a friend of hers, went with me to Cavecchio's to help pick out the flowers and transport them.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Can I make
ahead.
another comment, please? So Gary Phillips, our native plant consultant, and expert in town. Well, he and I prepared the soil at the Richdale corner, 135 and 20. And so as soon as his plants are ready, we're gonna put those in. But he's doing that all out of his own pocket and work and time. But I do have to say that the person who works at Ridgedale, who when he sees us out there working, always comes and is very encouraging, offering water. I think people are very appreciative of what we've done, but also in terms of town beautification, we have those beautiful chairs that the Cultural Council is moving around town, and I hope you've all noticed some of them or all of them. And the event Saturday was rainy, but the studios were amazing. The tour of the studios, wow, we've got some talented people in town, and people are already commenting on the chairs. So thank you, Jen, and your committee.
Excellent.
Yes, I had a fun time checking out the chairs when we were doing the planting yesterday. Right across on 4 West Main Street. I think there are 6 chairs. And then there are 4, I think, outside of the library, a couple outside of the Common. So they're really cool, and they are very cheerful. They made me happy just looking at them.
Good.
They're all very colorful, and so definitely check them out if you haven't seen them yet.
And they're for auction, so we're trying to raise some extra money, maybe to go to the electrical boxes. So they'll be up for sale, able to be used until June 22nd, and then the auction will be concluded then. So see what we can raise for money, but they came out really nice. We're very excited.
Cool. Well, thanks to everybody here, to Jen, to you and the Cultural Council, and Lori and Julianne and Amy, others on the committee that have been working on this. I think it's going to make quite a difference. Plus, it's going to show that there's a lot of people concerned about what the downtown looks like, and hopefully this is going to set the stage for us to do bigger and better things going forward here. But this is a really good first start kind of thing. So thanks once again to everybody for helping out with this, and we'll just keep moving this forward as we continue with the downtown revitalization. Anything else, Lori or Julianne, to report on this?
I don't, although I just saw Ashley's hand up, so.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ashley.
No, that was clapping. I was clapping.
Oh. You needed to turn it on and off, on and off.
You know what? I would just like to say one more thing, and I'm not going to mention the gas station that has done a little planting themselves, but actually 2 have. But to Lori's point, it's kind of, you start somewhere and people look and think, that looks nice, and they kind of start doing it too. And as we, I commented to those owners that it looks really nice, and they seem pretty happy about it. So if you stop in for gas, at any of those stations, it would be, I think they like to hear that their efforts are being noticed.
Okay, well, we'll keep up the good work on that area there. Next item on the agenda is update status of town offices feasibility study. The feasibility committee, offices feasibility study committee at this point has been disbanded. As we're aware, the recommendation was to create a new town offices building next to the White Cliffs mansion and also do the necessary work to bring the mansion back to its historic position and do the necessary work to stabilize the building and develop it for its use as a part of the community. I checked in with Tim McInerney to see exactly what happens next. And I guess the next step is going to be for Bill Pierce, who was the chair of that feasibility study committee, to meet with the select board at one of their meetings and just have a discussion about that recommendation and see what the next steps are going to be. So at this point, it's still kind of premature to really understand what the future of 4 West Main Street, Blake Street, and the Pierce Street Fire Station are, but to the extent that it is agreed that work should be done to take the next steps to develop the new town offices on the White Cliffs property, then that takes that whole area from 4 West Main Street down Blake to Pierce as available for some sort of revitalization. Exactly what that means and how that would happen would be another series of decisions that would have to be made. But until the decision is approved as to what to do with the town offices, it sort of puts on hold anything further there. One thing I was thinking about, the design work that was done by the consultants for the fire station on Pierce Street had a really nice proposal to take the back of that property down by Cold Harbor Brook and turn that into some sort of a little common area park with a path by the brook. And, their vision was some sort of a restaurant in the old fire station, which would, have seating and overlook all of that in the back there. So it'd be a combination of a public park, a small public park kind of space, along with some sort of a brew pub or restaurant or something. And I was thinking, would it make sense as we start to think about that property for the town, if they are going to issue an RFP at some point for someone to purchase or lease that property, to carve off the back part down by the brook and keep that as town property and sort of think about how we might want to develop that ourselves as a little pocket park, as opposed to trust if we sold all of the property that the developer would sort of see that vision and do something down there. So we might want to talk about, as we think more seriously about the fire station on Pierce Street, would the town want to retain ownership of the back part of the land and sort of develop that into a little park that would then, butt up against what we would then either lease or sell off as far as the fire station goes. So nothing we have to decide tonight, but just something I was thinking about that would give us the ability to at least implement some of the vision of what that property could look like, because I was always very enthused about, opening up that area of the land back behind the fire station as some sort of a public use, area. So just something I was thinking about. Good, Lori.
So if the town does decide to sell that property, then they can write up the RFP in such a way that potential buyers would have to submit their development proposals, and they can specify in the RFP what they would like to see for the brook. One of the challenges is the parcel. Of course, I don't know the size off the top of my head, but it isn't a very large parcel. And of course, we don't want to make it impossible for somebody to do something with the parcel by making the parcel too small. The minimum lot size is 4,000 square feet. However, the building itself is relatively large and they would need to have some sort of parking in order to make it viable, but definitely something we can talk about down the road. See what happens at town meeting, see if the fire department gets the funding that they need for their new fire station. But it's definitely something that we should carefully consider when the time comes to put together that RFP.
Yeah.
I think another thing that was extensively discussed was the idea of the Parks and Rec department being housed there in the future. Just, I mean, obviously any town offices at White Cliffs would be large enough to house them, but but I guess it's common practice for Parks and Rec departments to be housed in their own location with facilities for activities. And so I think with the high ceilings and the bays, it seemed like a really perfect spot for a Parks and Rec department. So that's something that could be a possibility in the future. And if they were to be housed there, then the backland could be, you know, open for outdoor recreation. And also I think when we were doing the downtown plan, I think I remember the consultants drew up something that had a trail along the brook that came to that spot. And so maybe it's something for the open space committee to think about trail easements along the backs of those properties there, you know, with the thought that someday that might be a park of some sort.
Yeah, I would agree. It would be nice if this, even if we granted, so there could be a way to walk from the bridge on Church Street across the brook, down along the brook, and maybe continue that behind the properties and end up all the way down on Hudson Street and connect into something going down there. So that's all something we could look into. So I assume, once again, Lori, that the project to do the Lake Street kind of redesign along with the public parking on Pierce, that's continually on hold right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been stalled for quite a while now. I'm hoping that, I know that, that presentation with the select board is scheduled for sometime in June.
Yeah.
So hopefully there'll be some loosening up of, our ability to go release that RFP. The unfortunate thing is that I anticipate that design is going to take about a year. And the major grants are all due the first week of June. So if we wait much longer, we're going to miss our window for those grants. So that's something that really should be considered.
Okay, I guess we're going to talk about that in these next item here about the support letters that mention some of this stuff. Before we move on to that, anything else, Ashley, from your standpoint, as far as town offices at this point?
Nope, but I think, you know, hopefully Julianne can report back after Bill presents. I'll be curious to hear how that goes when he presents to the select board.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about town offices feasibility at this point? It's something we're going to need to watch fairly closely from our committee, because that really will give us some direction as to where we should be going next with downtown revitalization. In the meantime, as we talked about, a lot of this work with planting and planters and things like that is really helping to at least improve the look of the downtown as we wait to see where these things are going.
I have a quick question, which I don't know if this is the right time to ask, but in the grid that we have, I noticed it talked about community spaces, and while people are figuring out what to do with certain buildings, maybe something can be done temporarily. And so I didn't know if there would be an appetite, and this might not be the right group to ask, for like a pop-up art gallery or a pop-up art event, or maker space, short-term sort of thing that could, you know, go in and easily move out. You know, we're doing artist receptions at the library right now. We could certainly try to expand that. I don't know, you know, it would be a short-term thing, able to use the building. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to ask that or later on, but just wanted to put that out there.
Do you think
Jen, I
about,
would recommend that you speak with Tim McInerney, Town Administrator, about for West Main.
Okay.
So it's my understanding that they are gonna release an RFP to lease some spaces. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Juliana. I saw the draft RFP.
Yeah, no, you're right, Lori. Yeah.
So some of the spaces are not in good shape. Like particularly the restaurant space is kind of in a shambles. But some of the other spaces, especially the office floor, I think that's the second or the third floor, look to be in pretty good shape from my standpoint. So maybe he would be open to that sort of thing. Realize that those spaces have been vacant for years, so they're not clean
Mhm.
and in need of paint. So
Well, artists like to paint and, you know, they're using factories in Hudson, so I can't imagine they'd be much worse looking than what they have over there. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I wasn't sure if this was the right spot to ask, so, but I
Yeah.
can certainly check in with Tim. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, he's definitely the right person to speak to about that.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, Rick,
Yep.
Ashley has her hand up, and Fran, did you take your hand down? Okay.
go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, I just didn't know if this was the time that we should talk about the letter that Lori sent around, since we were on the topic of White Cliffs and the town offices.
Yeah, so that's going to be the next agenda item, is to talk about
Okay.
these letters. So we'll get to that in
Sure.
a second.
Okay.
Oh, well, so before we move on to Jen's idea and what they're looking for, Jen, do you happen to know in Westboro when they did those pop-ups, was it in municipal owned buildings or was it in privately owned empty stores?
Well, the new boroughs, I'm thinking Crompton, that's the other one. The new boroughs thing they just put up in the bank across the street from Westboro House of Pizza, I think that's a privately owned building, but I think the ones in Hudson may be municipally owned.
Mhm. Because we do have a couple of empty storefronts that I don't know who reaches out to them and if they would be agreeable, but it's just another thought.
Yeah, Laurie Carbonneau just bought the Brillo coffee spot, and that seems to be in fairly good condition. I know she also owns the Bank of America building. So the white building in between is now open, I believe, as a doctor's office. Eventually, there's going to be a bridal shop in there. But that is another possibility too, vacant storefronts.
I mean, in Westboro, they do often use the empty storefronts over by where Staples and Stop and Shop. I've often seen them have just random pop-up programs and stuff. I would have to say for West Main Street, I mean, if the town is going to allow the public in there, does the elevator work? Is it ADA accessible? Do the bathrooms work? I think, I mean, obviously asking Tim, but that sounds like it has a lot of problems before the town would let the public go in there. But the empty storefronts is a great idea.
Okay, I want to move on to the next item, which are, the agenda talks about 3 letters, but as Lori told us, the one about financing construction of sewer extension on Route 9 is not going to happen. The select board opinion is not to go ahead and do that. So we have 2 others to talk about, the branding and wayfinding and the architectural services of White Cliffs Manor. Lori just sent us that letter this afternoon, so go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, so the first one I wanted to talk to you about is the wayfinding and branding program. So of course, that was a recommendation in the 2020 master plan. And then it appeared once again in the downtown revitalization plan. So the benefit of doing the branding program is to identify kind of like a logo, like an identity that can go through the various signs and possibly banners downtown. So the way this grant program works, so it's a technical assistance grant from the Mass Downtown Initiative. So they have certain consultants that they have kind of on retainer to do this work for various communities. So these are experts in the specific tasks, the specific types of grant programs that they offer. So I thought that this would be a good project for the MPIC to take on. It's a short-term commitment. So it'd kind of be like working with Weston and Sampson. So it would only be a few months. And it would be, I mean, the great thing about you folks is you already have the experience of having worked on the downtown revitalization plan as well as the master plan. And you have such broad representation from various groups. So in case you haven't noticed, I'm kind of adverse to continuously creating new committees. It ends up being really difficult for staff to work with so many different committees. So I like to utilize the same committees to do various tasks. So I think that this would be a good one for you folks to take on. So the consultant would come in, we would finalize the scope of work with them, and then they would offer various designs, different hierarchy of signs. We would discuss, we'd probably do a walking tour of the downtown. We would discuss key sites that we think should be identified with wayfinding signage. Also, there's some confusing traffic patterns that I think could be clarified with wayfinding signage. So we could identify those issues to this consultant team. And then my vision is that they would come up with maybe 3 different schemes. And then we would have a public workshop where they would present the 3 different schemes. And we would get feedback from the public on which ones they like best. And then they'd finalize them, give a presentation to the select board. Hopefully the select board would be on board with it. And then as part of the phase 1 downtown revitalization construction project, I would like to include some of these design elements into that design. So I think it would be a really good opportunity to start with this, with the brand and the wayfinding as the phase 1 project.
Comments, questions? Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, you're on mute.
There it is, excuse me. I have 2 comments. Of course, I'm gonna say, I would love to see students, interns do that, save the money and get fresh ideas that are not our age, that are something that's young and fun. And also, I did notice when we were putting the chairs out, we have 2 Steinberg white lanterns that were like sitting at 4 West Main, sort of like old and gross, but those same ones are downtown Westboro, same brand. And they have those cool banners that we had talked about before from Franklin and Marlboro, and they have those, you know, just sort of brightening up the downtown. I would be a little afraid of having so many additional signs because people are adverse to so much that's down there already. But I just think adding something like that might be kind of cool also. But I'm a little hesitant to hire a consultant to tell us what kind of signs when we might be able to find a student. That's all.
Other comments or questions?
I kind of like that idea. Could we try, you know, students first, and if we don't see anything that we like, then go to a professional? Or
Well, of course, I have no money, so there's that. This technical assistance grant, the way it works is that the Mass Downtown Initiative would pay the consultant directly, so I would never get money. It would just kind of, I'd get the service, we'd get the service, but not the money. I mean, the challenge is that students aren't expert in wayfinding and branding. So they might have some really good ideas that they could bring to the table on kind of like a logo. But I mean, how are they going to know where the most appropriate locations are for wayfinding signs? And I don't know. I'd just be kind of concerned about that.
I like the idea of, well, I guess I have similar concerns as Jen, that we don't need more signs, but I would hope having some type of way finding and branding would reduce the number of signs. We're not actually adding more, right? I mean, it's supposed to make what does exist more uniform.
So the idea would be to direct people to, like, for example, the library. For those of you who live here, it's very obvious where you go to get to the library. But for those of us who are, like the first time I tried to go to the library, I was all confused. Like, how do I actually get to the parking lot? So the idea of the wayfinding sign is you would have a sign that directs you to the library. So you would have a sign at the street with an arrow pointed library, or parking for the library or whatever the case may be. So that you are, and you can also do it for, certain businesses. That would be a decision that would be made. Like, for example, you could do, there's some stores that are kind of tucked in. I was sad to see that the Old Glory little craft shop has gone out of business. But that's a store that was kind of off the beaten path and tucked in. So they may have benefited from a wayfinding sign at the street that pointed to where they are. So that's kind of the point of the wayfinding, so that you are directing people to how to get to sites that might be confusing.
But I would hope that it would not significantly add to the signage, that there would be some that could come down. And I guess I love the idea of having young people look at logo, because that is part of branding, right? But a consultant will tell us, I mean, are we talking about signs for the 40-mile-an-hour car going through, or are we talking about additional wayfinding for the people who are going to be strolling down the street? So I think there's a need for both. I don't know which comes first, but certainly anytime there's free money, I don't know why we wouldn't apply for it, because it is our tax dollars at a state level coming back to us locally. But somehow marrying the two, having the professionals tell us where and how, and then, maybe that would give us, opportunity come the next school cycle to go to an Assabet Valley where they have the art classes and see whether there is a project. Right?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen from the other reports, wayfinding reports, is they're kind of conceptual. So what we could do is benefit from information from experts on where to place the signs, what type of signs we need. And then we could go to the art students afterwards and say, these are the concepts that people like the best. Design a logo for us. And we're going to put these on this hierarchy of signs that the consultant told us we need.
I mean, I personally think that sounds like a reasonable idea. It's just like when we changed our street signs downtown, our street signs are the burgundy with the seal on them, which we did that after Southborough did it, right? So that don't we have them downtown, or am I thinking Southborough? The burgundy signs with the seal, right?
We have them, we have
Yeah,
them.
okay, I'm just thinking of, so that is also uniforming, it's branding, and I think we're just trying to expand on that, right?
And that would also cover the parking. So, people have been complaining constantly about not knowing where the municipal parking lots are. So the point of the wayfinding signs is to point out where the various municipal lots are with signage.
Other comments? Questions? I think this idea of at some point trying to get some student help on the project, I think is a good idea. I think I agree with Lori that and Fran, that if in fact there is a state grant program available to provide people experience in doing this kind of thing, that we should apply for that. And then to the extent, both in terms of artistic design, or if in fact this kind of wayfinding development is part of the curriculum at some technical school, if we even wanted to involve an intern or two to be part of our committee to work on some of the wayfinding thing, we could include that as part of the project. But I think having the project driven by some professional firm that's done this kind of work in other towns would seem to make the most sense, especially if in fact there's a grant availability for it. So maybe we can, if people are agreeable, we can start by applying for this particular grant and then talk about how we could attach some sort of intern help to it along the way kind of thing, because I think there could be a good way to combine the two together and get the benefit of both professional experience and some of the new kind of outlook on things, benefit from both. I think it's probably what we need to do is the idea here is this is going to go out from our committee under my name. So we need to get agreement for the committee if we actually want to send this letter, and these things need to go out fairly soon. So is there any discussion or questions before I call for a vote on whether we agree for this committee to send this letter or not? Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then I'm going to call the roll here and just indicate whether you're in agreement or opposed to sending the letter, and we can take it from here. So then we'll move on to the next letter after we do this one. So Julianne,
Yes, aye.
Ashley,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Fran, Gene Kennedy,
Aye.
Gene Cahill.
Abstain.
Okay, Rick Leaf would vote aye, and Jen Tolman.
Aye.
Okay, so we have all in favor and one abstention. Do I need to physically sign that letter, Lori, or not?
If you would, one possibility is you could just print it, sign it, and then just email it back to me.
I'll scan it to you. Okay, I could do that.
Yeah, if it's gonna be too hard for you to come to the town hall,
So when do you need to get this in the mail by?
next week. So it's due on June 5th. But I would like to submit a couple of days in advance, because anything that will go wrong, could go wrong, will go wrong mentality. So I never like to leave things to the last minute.
I suppose I can come in Tuesday morning and sign it. Would that work?
That would be fabulous.
Okay, let's move on to the second letter, which has to do with the work at the White Cliffs. You want to go into that one, Laura?
Sure. So this is the underutilized properties grant. So there are two aspects to that grant program. It's a mass development grant program. One aspect covers pre-development work. So essentially design, surveys and the like. And then the second aspect is construction. So what I would like to do is hire an architectural firm to do the services necessary to prepare the construction documents to demolish the 1960s additions and then button up the building in a temporary way that will last approximately 5 years until we figure out what we're going to do with this building. So that would be the phase 1 project. It would take approximately 6 months. We would go out and get 3 quotes. I did already receive a quote from DBVW. They're the firm that did the initial assessment report and feasibility analysis. So they're the ones that are most familiar with the building as it currently exists. So the second phase of the project is the actual financing for the demolition, the buttoning up the building, and also for some environmental mitigation work. So I am interested in applying for that grant round next year. So that would also be due most likely the first week of June. So in the fall, I would like to submit an application to the Community Preservation Committee for approximately $250,000 of historic funds to provide a match. So this grant program doesn't require a match, but they say in the application that it will be much more competitive if we do supply one. So that would enable us to do $1,250,000 worth of work. So once those additions come down, I think we can start working on some of the other issues that the building has. So of course, I'm sure you folks are aware of the extensive mold and mildew problem. Then there's also some issues that we have with lead paint, as well as lead in the grounds around the building. And then there's a fuel storage tank in the basement that needs to come out. So the cost estimate for the environmental work is, I believe, $1.4 million. So there's plenty for us to do. And I think that that would position the building for something to happen. Whether it becomes the future home of the town hall will be that much further ahead. Whether it is sold to a private entity, it would be more attractive to others with some of this work already done. So I don't really see the negative to doing this work. So I'm hoping for your support on this grant application.
So to be clear, the letter that we have tonight we're talking about is the one that would provide grant funding to hire an architectural firm to do the design of how this would happen.
Yeah.
And then based on having that design, there would then be a separate project to actually go ahead and get the financing to do the work. All we're asking for with this is the funding, and this would be 100% covered. The fee of this would be, of the architect would be completely covered by this grant. There'd be no town contribution for this particular phase.
That's correct. So in the grant application, which I've already written, I talk quite a bit about how much the town has already invested in this property. So I don't think it's as important that we supply a match at this point, because there's been over $2.4 million in taxpayer money already invested. So I feel comfortable going ahead without the match, given that the cost of this phase of the project is only about $75,000.
Questions, comments
Yeah.
on this one?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Lori, you noted that DBVW, is that right? I
Yeah.
don't know if I had those acronyms right. Already provided a quote. Is that, so this first step would be the end result of this first step would be to get quotes, and we already have one? Is that, am I understanding that correctly or wrong?
So should we get the grant? So I'm required by law to get 3 quotes. So I will do that. And then the town has the ability to hire whoever the town feels is most qualified. So when it comes to design work, we are not required to go with the lowest bidder. We can go with whoever we want to go with as long as they're qualified. So there's that. So at the end of this project, should we get funding, I'm hoping for actual construction drawings and like specific specifications and bid documents.
So the quote from DBVW right now is the cost to create those construction drawings. And then based on those, we would be able to engage somebody to figure out the cost and actually do the construction.
Correct. So,
Okay.
so what they will do is they will create construction. So it'll be bid documents, plans, as well as a cost estimate. So I will take that cost estimate and I will use that cost estimate to apply for construction work. So I already have a cost estimate from Capital Environmental for the environmental mitigation. So that one's all set. So I just need to have them update their cost estimate to reflect the fact that it's a year later. So I just need the cost estimate, and then if we get the grant, we'll have to go out to bid. So this will be a sizable project, and then we would award the contract to the lowest qualified bidder.
Got it. Okay. I mean, where I was going with that was wondering if we had enough information in hand to apply for phase 1 and phase 2 at the same time, but it sounds like we don't have that yet. Yeah.
No, and also the grant application specifically states that they will fund pre-development or they will fund construction. They will not
Okay.
fund both.
Okay. Got it.
Unless I mean, maybe they made an exception once or twice, but they said specifically, do not apply for both.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Jen, did you have your hand up?
I do.
Yeah.
So Lori, just so I'm understanding correctly, so this grant money is for the demo and environmental fixing of as much as can get done with the money that comes through the grant. So it'll stop at some point.
So
Like
that's next
it might-
year's.
It might get
Yes.
the lead and et cetera, and mold and mildew, or it's step 1 is demo, zip it up in mold and mildew, and step 2 is lead. Like, is that like a different step or?
So
like-
step 1 is design. So that is what this grant application is for. It's for design only.
Design of demo or design of, this is what it could look like after all this is done?
It's the design of the demo and the design of the buttoning up the building. So
Okay.
unfortunately, when they put one of the large additions, so there is a large second floor addition where they removed an entire side of the historic building.
Mhm.
So that entire side will come off where that addition is. So then they have to figure out a way to close up the building to make it weather tight
Mhm.
for that period of time that we're still trying to figure out what we're doing with this building.
Mhm.
So step 1 this year, design only. Step 2 next year would be environmental mitigation, demolition, and buttoning up the building.
So the grant that you apply for by the 1st of June, that money will take care of both step 1 and step 2, or that's
No.
only the design for step 1?
Only step 1.
And there's additional grant money that you can go or go after for step 2, right?
Yeah, so next year,
Okay.
in June, we would be able to apply for step 2.
Okay, I'm just asking how far out the planning is, because, I think I mentioned before, Mass Cultural Council gives like grant money to help fix up buildings with an artisty kind of thing in it, and it was for last year and it's closed and there isn't one so far for this year. So I'm wondering if they do it every other, I don't really know Mass Cultural, if they do it every other year or whatever. So then it's good to know that it would be like a later point in time where we could say, you know, this, whatever, square foot, square foot area could be an artist space or gallery space or whatever, and kind of go after that sort of a grant, maybe. So it's good to know
We're
that
not
it's
to that point.
later on.
Because right now, there's no agreement on what to do with this building.
Mhm.
And there's no utilities, no functioning utilities. So we're probably years away from
that.
actually getting to the point where the building can be occupied. So, and multiple millions of dollars away. The estimate in 2020 was $7 million.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that we could avail of ourselves of that grant money at some point in the future, but we're just not there yet.
Okay.
John just texted me saying he's trying to get in, but I don't see him, so I'm thinking he's using the other login.
Would you point them to the right login?
So anyway,
So at this point, any other questions or comments for Lori on this particular letter? Once again, the letter is to ask for $75,000 of grant funding to hire an architectural firm to design the work that would need to be done to take the next step of construction mitigation of the building. Hearing none, we can take a roll vote on this also to see if we have approval for our committee to send a letter in support of this. Julianne?
Aye.
Ashley?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Fran?
Right.
Gene Kennedy?
Aye.
Gene Cahill?
Aye.
Rick Leaf votes aye. Jen?
Aye.
We have unanimous vote. Is this another one? When I come in on Tuesday, I can sign this one also?
awesome. Thank you very much for your support.
Okay, well, I think these are two good things to get moving on here, and especially be interesting once this wayfinding branding thing gets going. I think it'll be a good, as you said, a good thing for the committee to sort of stay involved with, kind of thing. And we can sort of talk about as we get down the road here about how and when we might apply some intern help to this also. Okay, next item on the agenda, discussion of Economic Development Coordinator Committee. This sort of comes up from some conversations Julianne and I have had over the past couple of weeks about a lot of things are kind of going on in and around the downtown, and how do we get involved with sort of trying to better manage what's going on with economic development. The 2020 master plan recommended some combination of a staff position to manage this with some committee support. And the downtown revitalization study recommended the town consider hiring an economic development coordinator or manager or something. So that was reinforced in the master plan. So the question now is how aggressively do we move on this, and in what manner do we move on this? Maybe I'll defer to you, Julianne. Maybe you can give us some of your ideas as to what you're thinking about.
Well, I think the first thing is that I had, and because many people have commented that where many towns do have economic development committees, and I was kind of thinking that would be the first place to start. Let them, come together and figure out what an economic development person could provide for our town. And so, what is our decision tonight? Do we want to go to the select board and say, we encourage you to develop this committee? Or do we think that hiring a person right off is the best way to go? My question, at which is also, is it possible instead of hiring a full-time staff person to hire like an intern or like a consultant for a while, not necessarily a forever job? So those were three things that I had been thinking about. Also, you know, if everyone comments on how lovely Hudson has become over the last several years, they have a BID, Business Improvement District, that I think one person, it's a staff position that one person runs, and they have, you know, they've coordinated it beautifully. So, and I look forward to hearing what people think.
I don't recommend going with an intern. And the reason why I say that is because I've worked with a number of interns. I was an intern. And when you have an intern, they don't know what they're doing. They're looking for direction from the town. So, you know, when I have an intern, I know that it's a mentoring expedition for me, and that I shouldn't expect a lot of quality output, because mostly what my role is to teach. And then, you know, I would assign them basic tasks to do. So in this circumstance, I think that it's important to have somebody captain the ship. So right now, we don't have an economic development committee. So if we form an economic development committee, then they will be looking for some sort of direction as to what they're supposed to be doing. So if you have an intern who's looking at the economic development committee as the entity who's supposed to be telling the intern what to do, then I think you kind of end up with a fiasco in the end where you're not making any forward momentum. So my recommendation is to hire the staff person first and then hire the committee. Because right now I don't have the staff capability to staff yet another committee. I already have 5. And, you know, this week I had 3 night meetings. So I just can't take on another night meeting, a night committee, unless they were to meet during the day.
Other
So,
people on the
Rick?
committee comments?
So, I mean, we are the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and I'm going to speak as the representative of the Council on Aging and ask that we look at our goals and objectives and see that we have many short-term and long-term goals that have nothing to do with the downtown. And we've done a big step forward on the downtown, but we can't only focus on the downtown. And 2 things, we just passed an $80 million budget with 11 new positions, and we are right at the top of our levy limit. Looking to increase town staff for this project is probably not, there's not going to be an appetite for that next year. But there are certain steps within the matrix that I think that we need to start expanding on. The economic development of downtown, there's just like so many different pieces. We don't know what land is available. We don't know, we're never going to be Hudson. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have a lieutenant governor from Northborough who's funneling money into the community to fund these things. I mean, I want to see us talk about affordable alternative housing for seniors or walkability outside of the downtown, sidewalk repair, things like that, to make our older adults have more access to what little we do have before we start creating more. But I feel like I want to move beyond downtown and look at the grid and see who we should be handing these things off to and not continuing to do them ourselves.
Okay, thanks. Other comments?
I mean, I think we have a lot going on in town right now. There's a lot in flux. There's a lot that was delayed for many years because of a very fiscally conservative town administrator. I think there's a lot of projects we need to do, and if we need an additional staff person to assist Lori and to really help this downtown work move forward, yeah, we've made some progress, but if we don't have somebody to really move it forward, it's not gonna go anywhere to completion. So I feel like I don't know that we're the body to say that this needs to happen, but I think we really do need somebody who's focusing on economic development in the town as a whole. And obviously a lot of that's going to be focused downtown, but that could be a hybrid assistant town planner role as well. I mean, there's just a lot under Lori's purview right now, a lot that is happening with all of the buildings in town and new fire station, new town. There's just so much happening. I think there's a really good case for an additional staff person. And that doesn't have to take away from all these other master plan goals, Fran. I think it just helps to make sure that there's somebody to oversee all the things that we've kind of gotten started. And then we can refocus our attention to, all these other smaller items that we can actually pick off as a committee.
Yeah, I totally agree, and actually, I think you make some really good points on that. I mean, I'm looking at the grid though under economic development. We already said that creating a downtown planning revitalization committee made up of residents, business owners, and representatives of the boards. We have that. It's one of our goals, right? And the implementation leadership is supposed to be the Board of Selectmen and the planning board. So I guess if we're going to look at this, to Julianne's point, it goes handed right back to Julianne as the Board of Selectmen to start working on that. They then have to decide it's a priority for them. To your point, it's not up to us to decide it's a priority. It's up to us to look at the grid that was created and say, who is the leadership, implementation leadership, and do they consider it a high priority? But I do think the funding for a staff position is not something that we can reasonably see in next year's budget. But I think you're right. They don't have to be exclusive of one another, but we are only one committee as well.
Other comments? And my feeling is, I think an economic development committee without a staff capability to support it is kind of not going to lead us to any kind of conclusions where we need to be right off the bat. I think there's no doubt that if in fact there was a sufficient staff support to support a group of citizens and kind of took this on and work with a staff person to move economic development, which could be more than just the downtown area itself. There's probably opportunities outside of what we've defined as downtown also. So I think to your point, Fran, I think probably the town administrator and select board probably need to think their way through the budget process for the next fiscal year to see if in fact there is a way to provide some funding for that capability. And then if in fact there is, to think through what there would need to be as far as a supporting committee to go along with that position. If in fact there wasn't the ability for the next fiscal year to provide that kind of staff support, then I think things would just sort of happen as a catch-as-catch-can basis. There may be some direction our committee can provide or recommendations to provide, but ultimately things would just sort of continue to develop on their own. Well, the other thing also is, with no decision being made on the relocation of the town offices, it's hard to understand in the downtown area exactly what the possibilities are going to be. So it could be just some short-term leases on some of this space to bring in some dollars until it's clear what the longer-term direction is going to be. Might be all that can happen in the next fiscal year, or two. So I think also the kind of the decision on the relocation of the town offices bears kind of heavily on this. And I do agree with you, Fran. I think there are other items in the grid, in the matrix that we could start to bring forward and discuss, also kind of things. So my sense would be, Julianne, from your perspective, you think it would be helpful to have an agenda item on an upcoming select board meeting to talk about economic development, what the different options are, and get a discussion going about, is there any appetite to consider any kind of either full-time or consulting support to move this thing forward in the short term. You know, we could sort of help sort of guide that discussion in front of the select board. But ultimately, I think it would sort of rest between the select board and the town administrator to decide if, in fact, I think what I'm sensing from the committee is that starting an economic development committee with the lack of adequate staff support for it probably isn't going to get us where we need to be. Is there anyone else who has a different opinion, has a feeling that having a committee prior to staff support makes any sense? Go ahead, Tracy.
I just wanted to agree with how Ashley phrased it. I think the pace and momentum of what we can do for change is very different with that role being filled by someone. And I think it's the key to making progress forward. I think there's also business leaders that would like to see that economic continuity. You know, I think Lori, we talked a little bit about some of the development of businesses coming to come in and not knowing really what our focus is and not having that, you know, what does the town of Northborough want to look like? So I think it all goes together under that umbrella of that position. I think it's just super important that that's something that we consider. And I think the town's ready for it. I think that they would support that role on some level as a paid position through the town.
Gene Kennedy has been raising his hand.
I don't see Gene on my screen. I'm sorry, Gene. Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead, Gene.
Well, there is an Industrial Development Commission as one of the committees in town. I don't know anything about what they do, what their charge is, but obviously it has some economic perspective or charge. There's probably a need for a more general conversation about organizing for economic development in the town. You know, I don't know, for example, if one of the selectmen has been charged as the point person for economic development to sort of help coordinate that. If not, maybe that would be one step if it's an important enough component of town government. You know, if there was one select person who was charged with sort of organizing a conversation about economic development in the town, bringing in the Industrial Development Commission and others to have that conversation, that certainly could start now. And as it works its way over the next 12 months, to the extent that there's some discussion and agreement about the need for an additional economic development planner staff support, then that would be reflected in the budget process for next year and be voted on at next town meeting as an additional staff person. And I would suggest that whoever that person is be assigned to work under Lori for purposes of coordination. You know, I've seen examples where there's staff people reporting to one committee and another staff person reporting to another committee, and the two never quite meet or gel or coordinate. So I think there's plenty of time to have that conversation. And then if at the end of that conversation, the town manager and the selectmen say, you know, we really do need a person. We have so much on our plate now. If you go back to the 2020 master plan and look at future development in that plan, the biggest component is industrial and commercial land. And I think it was something like 4 million square feet of future development. We've also heard and seen issues of conflicts between existing residents and ongoing development over the last year or two. So it's a growing issue for the town. It needs some discussion to take place, and we certainly have time to do that. And I think that would be one way to get the actors who make the decisions involved. We don't have to be involved like Fran said, we have many other goals to discuss and look at, but just getting that conversation going may lead to a revised economic development process in the town with additional staff people, and that would certainly foster the downtown revitalization and other economic development issues that the town has. So that's how I'd approach it.
Okay, thanks. Good comments, Gene. Are there any, go ahead, Julianne.
So, I'm worrying the same thing that Fran said about the cost of bringing on another permanent staff person. However, if this person really did a great job, the increase in business and business revenue might pay for that person's position. Don't you think?
But certainly the potential is there for that. But I think to Gene's point, sort of the next steps on this have to move out of our committee and probably most fittingly lie between the select board and the town administrator to think about economic development as a need in the town and how to go best about, doing it. And then to the extent that our committee can provide any support to that or answer any questions, we could do that. But I think if maybe Julianne, you could bring this back, to the select board and maybe get an agenda item to start a discussion on economic development, talk about some of the things we talked about tonight, get the town administrator's viewpoint and start to see where the town wants to go. There certainly is sufficient time between now and the start of the next budget cycle to be considering what might be possible and what appetite the select board and the administrator has for staff support for this kind of thing, or what some of the alternatives, might be. But I think that would logically sort of have us complete our part of the job, which was to sort of move forward that recommendation that came out of the master plan and then the downtown revitalization study to the proper individuals in town who need to take the next steps with it.
Okay.
Any other
If I may.
discussion about this? Lauren, go ahead.
I as somebody who's been trying to promote economic development activities in the downtown, I do have to say that I am kind of confused by some of the boards and committees, because some of the actions that I have tried to go forward with that aren't met with support are exactly what an economic development director would do. So like, for example, the MassWorks grant for the sewer extension project to Route 9, that appeared multiple times in the master plan. And that is exactly the type of thing that an economic development director would do. So, but it wasn't supported by the select board. So, and then there have been other things like large scale industrial projects that haven't been supported by the land use boards. So there's only so much that a staff person can do when all the decisions are being made by boards that may not be supportive of those actions. So I don't quite understand what this economic development person would do that would be supported by the various boards. I mean, is the expectation that this person is going to act like a realtor and just fill empty spaces? Because that's not what they do. Or is the expectation that they're going to organize events that'll bring people to the downtown, like Apple Fest? Because they could do that, but the typical duties that an economic development director would do would bring large-scale industrial development downtown, but to town. And encourage businesses to develop in town. But when we have land use boards that won't approve development of, new construction, I don't know how this person is going to be successful.
So I think I would like, if everybody looks at the matrix under economic development at some point, there are a lot of things that we can look at that don't require hiring somebody. And some, even if that was the answer, it's not going to happen for another year and a half, right? And the fire station is not going to move out for another year and a half. And the town hall is not going to move or be renovated for probably 5 to 10 years out. But there are things that we can look at that maybe will help. So to bring all these players together, because there is, I mean, having been on one of the land use boards for 12 years, there's a disconnect in when we close our eyes and we say, what do we want? And then when it actually has to happen in certain places or under certain circumstances, all of a sudden it's not what people have dreamt of. I mean, because I don't know what, and I don't know who they are, right? Is it us to decide? Is it, like, what do the townspeople want when they say they want a revitalized downtown or they want economic development, right? I mean, there's such a loud voice out there that no, we don't want anything. We want to be a sleeping community like we used to be, that we are no longer, right? I mean, I still remember somebody who moved into a new development saying to me, we should put a fence around Northborough. And I said, we tried, but you got in anyway, right? Because they were in the last new development. So it's such a hard thing. I mean, because this person is not going to wave a magic wand and then make downtown walkable and traffic run smoothly and, again, bring businesses in if we're not going to be able to support them through the application process.
Well, I mean, all those comments are true. I mean, there's going to need to be a reconciliation as to exactly what it is the town wants and what the town wants to do. And I think ultimately that will fall, between really the land use boards and the select board to sort of come up with a plan or a strategy as to where the town is going moving forward and how much of this stuff that's coming out of these plans is acceptable and doable and wants to be done. I think, the position we were put in was to interpret the plan and to try and bring forward those things that we thought made sense and recommend that action be taken to move them forward, kind of thing. And obviously, because the whole downtown revitalization received the most attention in the development of the master plan, that's kind of where we've been moving. We're sort of getting to the point now, as people are saying, about how much are we actually going to do? How much do people want to do? And how much do the people who are sitting on the boards that have the ability to grant the ability to make it happen? Where do they kind of stand on all of this kind of thing? So, I kind of agree that we've sort of taken the downtown at this point about as far as we can take it, as far as what our recommendation is, and I'm not
Rick,
sure what we can do next.
I mean, so John and I have had our hands up. I'm just kind of surprised because we went through this entire exercise on downtown revitalization with a consultant who said, we need to have an economic development coordinator, whether it's an economic development coordinator or a business improvement coordinator, whatever you want to call it, is a person who will help us fill these businesses downtown, ensure that our regulations and our zoning are favorable to allow businesses to thrive, make it a place where people want to come. And yes, he did say that that position would be someone who would be going out and beating the bushes and finding people to come to our town. So I don't agree, Lori, when you say that that's not what they do. They're not bringing in industrial development. They wouldn't do that where it's not appropriate. if we're asking for somebody to come in and help revitalize our downtown, then that's what they will do.
Well, the
And that
economic
is what the
development.
consultant
Oh, I'm sorry.
recommended.
I'm sorry.
That's right. That's what the consultant recommended. I mean, I think we trusted the consultants to do a good job. We trusted their recommendations, and that's what they told us to do. And so I don't see that as a step that we wouldn't take to complete this process.
I guess my concern as somebody who is a staff person, you know, I bring the applicants to the boards, but the boards aren't interested in approving the businesses.
I think
So
that there's a disconnect.
So right now, the town has a reputation of not allowing development. So
there's a difference between development and taking what we have and making it better. That is what everybody wants to see. That's what we've heard from residents for years and years. We have a downtown that just is lacking. And there are empty businesses. There are multiple gas stations and pizza places. We just want a better downtown. We don't want more buildings. We don't need more buildings. I understand the sewer down to Route 9. Kathy wanted that for a long time. I understand that to sort of bulk up our tax base. But what people want to see is a better downtown. They don't need more industrial. They don't need more buildings, more housing. And I know you say with more people downtown, there'll be more businesses. Sure, to a certain extent. But I think people just want us to focus down there, not more, just better. That's what I have heard. And I think that's the disconnect between what's being approved and what people want to see, or what's not being approved and what people want to see.
John, what are your comments, John?
So apologize to be late to the meeting, but sometimes when you're late to the meeting, you get to hear the arguments from each side and see it from a different perspective. So I'm going to say this: this committee, and serving on this committee, all of us want to be useful in some way. And so from Fran's perspective, I see where can we move on and have an impact on other areas. But the number one thing I'm hearing is that our town planner, Lori Connors, who is the number one person to move forward what we might do in downtown development, master plan development, and in this committee, is expressing an issue that has to be brought to the table. Until our select board and our planning board can reach a consensus on what is the direction for town, irrespective of who the members are in those committees, then it's difficult to move forward. It doesn't matter if it's Lori or an economic development person that would come in, who I think she's saying that person would be just as hamstrung with what could be approved and what's not approved. So one role of this committee could be, how do we advocate for a direction that gets all those committees to reach a consensus? There might be differing opinions, but this is the direction that we should take on these aspects of downtown development. Be it the Blake Street area where we're fighting for just a little bit of money to get the next step and so on. So that's one area where this committee could be useful. Let's express a voice that's consistent and says to our select board, our planning board, get on the same page with these goals. And then on the other hand, this committee, each time we meet, can look at small areas where we can make an impact. And I think where Fran was going was, okay, we did downtown development, we did a big consultant study, we're sort of paused at what we can do next, but where else could we make an impact? And if those were suggestions that could enhance our agenda next meeting and next meetings after that, those are my thoughts on hearing what people are saying.
Very good summary.
Other comments?
Yeah, I have another follow-up. As somebody who's sat in the same seat as Laurie for a good number of years, Laurie, welcome to my world. It's very frustrating. You don't have the final say on a lot of critical projects. It's the boards, the commissions, the selectmen that do. and sort of come back in the office on Monday morning and start another project. That's sort of how it works. To follow up on what I said, one suggestion that we could maybe make as a committee would be to write a letter and send it to the land use boards and the boards of selectmen and say, based on our work over the last 18 months, it seems that there's a need for public discussion about economic development and the future of Northborough. And maybe suggest something like in the fall, a forum on economic development that the selectmen attend, the land use boards attend. And like we had with the downtown study where we had public input, the public could attend and maybe get a conversation going that would lead to one direction or another. One direction might be, well, we really don't want to hire another person. There's not that much downtown to begin with. We're never going to be Hudson. We're never going to be Westboro. But that's giving direction. The opposite side might be, we need to hire somebody. We need to make efforts to solve the problems between industrial, commercial, and residential development. We need to reorganize the Industrial Development Committee so it's more of a town-wide economic development entity, and there's different models for that, and get that conversation going and see where it leads. It may lead to supporting a staff position in the next budget, or it may not, but it would be direction. And we could take the position that, we did our share, we did our work, we did the studies. We see some critical issues that are now pending before the town, and it's up to the elected boards and commissions to make some decisions, and a public forum might be one way to do that.
So Jean, that is exactly what the matrix says that we should do. When you look at the economic development section, the leadership implementation team is the select board, the planning board, the town administrator, the town planner. So that's how we move it forward, just like we just did with the dams, right? We identified, there was some research, we're going to keep an eye on it, but we moved it over to the next board. But you're absolutely right. And then it's up to them whether they make this the priority.
And like we've done
So
with these various letters on different topics, we can do the same thing on economic development, just to spur the conversation along a bit,
That's definitely something we could do. I mean, I could draft a letter for review of this board to sort of move that along, kind of thing. I guess I'd look for some input from Lori and Julianne as to, does that seem to be a reasonable next step? I got a cramp in my leg. That's why I'm standing up here at this point. Is that something that we could do to try and foster some decision-making as to where we want to go with all of this and how aggressively we want to move on it? And then to Fran's point, I think at this point, we're probably going to defer any discussion about the matrix to the next meeting. We're closing in a little bit after 9 o'clock here now, but this has been an interesting discussion. I mean, so let's just get a couple of comments on Jean's suggestion here that, we recommend through some sort of letter from our committee back to the select board and planning board that there's a need to reach some community consensus on where we're going with all of this so that we understand, what kind of support the town is willing to give and what the staff needs to be doing to work forward on this that'll be supportable by the different elected boards. Fran, you had your hand up?
it was just a
Got
thumbs
it.
up. I agree.
Thumbs up. Oh, okay.
I
So-
agree.
Sorry to get heated earlier, just so frustrated, just that I feel like we can't make movement on this. So I think that Jean's suggestion is fantastic.
Me too.
Yeah, I agree. And, honestly, as a staff person, I just want to be clear on what the direction is. I'm happy to do whatever it is that you folks want me to do. I just need to know what that is. Like, you know, when I look at the master plan, and I kind of see that as my blueprint for action. So when I'm thinking about projects to go forward with, I'm looking at the master plan for guidance. And so for me, it's kind of frustrating when I'm headed in that direction. And then it turns out that no, there is no support for that specific action. So then I mean, what am I supposed to be working on then? You know, if I'm not confident that there's support for the recommendations that exist in the master plan, then it makes it difficult for me to feel like I'm on solid footing with the tasks that I'm, you know, wanting to accomplish.
It's interesting, if you think about it, we included an executive summary at the beginning of the report from the consultants on the downtown revitalization. If you remember, we were fairly clear that there wasn't consensus on some of the recommendations that came out of the consultant's study, and that we said the town was going to have to figure out a way to get some consensus around some of these things. Otherwise, this plan wasn't going anywhere. And I think what we're seeing is that's turning out to be true, that in fact, there are certain things that are being recommended from the plan that are not happening right now, just through, I think, disagreement from different people as to what seems to make the most sense and what do we really want to do. So, you know, we can sort of go back, I can go back and take that and maybe sort of in the letter I'm going to write, sort of reinforce kind of what we had said a couple of months ago whenever that was, that we submitted the plan to the select board, that we anticipated there was going to be, you know, not total agreement on all of these things. And the next important step is to try and gain consensus and agreement on where we're going. So I can take a shot at coming up with that. Then provide that, you know, for the review of this board. Just from a timing perspective, I guess to do this properly, the goal would be for me to have this letter ready for review as an agenda item at the next meeting. We can talk about it. In the meantime, people can read it over before the next meeting and then come up to see if it's saying what we all think it ought to say, you know, kind of thing. So we can take it from there. Any other comments or suggestions? Julian?
I just want to point out a timeline for the select board. We are having a big goal setting meeting July 29th with a consultant. So if that letter could be brought to us and our recommendations before that, that'd be, that would be perfect timing.
So really having our committee have consensus on this letter at our June meeting.
Yeah.
We give it time to then, you know, finalize that letter and then have it sent to the chair of the select board and the chair of the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, I'm curious, what consultant is that?
I don't know exactly who we've hired yet, but there's people from the MMA and in the, you know, town administrator circles, people who come in and facilitate those kinds of meetings. It's not that they, that's the understanding I have. It's more of a facilitator and someone who can help us when we identify goals, hopefully tell us how to implement the goals.
All right, well, what I sort of see developing here for the June meeting is three items, maybe getting a further update from Jean and Ashley on anything that's proceeded with this project on the dam removal, followed by a review and discussion of this letter that we're going to send, recommending that things start to happen to reach consensus around some of these decisions that have to be made as far as economic development and other recommendations in the plan. And then I think we really ought to then focus on this updated matrix that was sent to us in the past week. One thing I'll say is I kind of like it, kind of organized back in its original format by the different goals and what was in there, as opposed to having them split out by the different departments and things where things appeared multiple times. I think the way Michelle sent this last version to us we can kind of see by all the major aspects of the plan, what's been done, what hasn't been done, and what we want to do next. So I think that's a good way to maybe continue to discuss how we want to move forward on that. So why don't we see if we can't sort of set aside the greatest part of our meeting in June to talk about what we're seeing in the matrix and ideas people might have for what are good opportunities to move other things forward. If it turns out other things crop up between now and then, we can add them to the agenda, but I guess I'm seeing right now those three things as being the three key things for the agenda for the June meeting. Like I said, I'll take a shot at this this letter from our committee to the select board and the planning board. I'll check with Lori to see if there's anybody else she thinks it should go to, and then we'll have a discussion about that at the next meeting and get ready to send it off and then see where that goes. I think some of the comments that Gene Kennedy made tonight, I think the process he was talking about seems to make a lot of sense. So maybe following that, and if it makes sense to have a public discussion around this, I think that could also be very helpful. Although once again, that will tend to bring out differing points of view. I mean, the master plan meetings themselves and the downtown meetings with the downtown revitalization brought out competing points of view, which led us to believe they had to be reconciled. So I guess the question is going to be, how do we reconcile them and get on a path of action for the town? So if we can help.
One other thought I had, we might want to, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we could maybe combine the matrix and this letter. For example, we could submit a letter to the selectmen with the matrix attached, stating the fact that, I just looked at the numbers, like over 50% of the goals have either been completed or are underway or are ongoing. So as far as I would say, that's a pretty good achievement for a master plan that's only 4 years old. So we could provide it to the selectmen as a summary of what this committee has pulled together, and then go on to say, one of the primary issues that we see as a committee is the issue of economic development, and then lay out several bullets about what we think could and should happen in terms of townwide discussion, forums, communication, and decisions to move economic development along. So,
Yeah.
maybe we could talk more about that at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that's a good way to phrase it. I mean, one thing we have not done as a committee is just provided an update back to the town on where we stand on the master plan. And I think that's something we said we would try and do from time to time. So this might be a perfect opportunity to form this communication as you're saying, here's an update on where we stand with actions on the goals of the master plan. And here's what we see as being a key item that needs discussion and resolution to move forward on some of the key goals that seem to be going anywhere right now.
Right.
Yeah, I like that idea. The people are generally in agreement with that approach. Anybody not in agreement? Yeah, good idea, Gene. I'll try and draft the letter that way. And then Lori, we can talk about how to attach that matrix onto the letter.
Okay, and I know that we're still working on getting additional updates from various department heads like the DPW director and the superintendent's office. So hopefully we'll have some more updates to share at the next meeting.
Okay. And once again, between now and the June meeting, please spend some time, go through the matrix, develop some of your own questions and ideas. And like I said, let's see if we can't use that June meeting, to get a good discussion going about what we've accomplished so far and what are some of the things people see we ought to be thinking about moving forward on next, kind of thing. Okay, we are running a little bit late tonight, which I apologize for, but I think this was a good discussion. I think it brings out some things that are vital for the town to make some decisions on. Just want to give you an update. I haven't heard anything more, Lori, about training for committee chairs on hybrid meetings. Is anything more going on with that at this point?
Yeah, I spoke with Dana yesterday and he said that he thinks that he will have the training documents ready within another week or so.
Okay.
So hopefully I'm actually doing the first hybrid webinar in conference room B on the first floor, the conference room next to the planning office. That's going to be on Tuesday night. It's a ZBA meeting. So a couple of design review committee meetings have been hybrid, and those have worked out fine. So, you know, if you want to try it, then I feel pretty comfortable that I'd be able to do that after already having done 2 meetings that way with the design review committee.
Maybe you and I can talk about that a little bit. And I guess also from your perspective, based on your own personal schedule, I guess would your feeling be if we start to meet in a hybrid manner on a Thursday evening, would your preference be to physically be on site, or would you prefer from your own lifestyle that you'd come to these meetings remotely?
If you folks decided that you wanted to meet every single month in person, that'd be a challenge for me because I live 35 minutes away.
Yeah.
So for me to drive home after I get out of work at 4 and then drive back and do that multiple times a week is really difficult. So probably what I would do is I would just stay. And then if that happens multiple times a week, then I might as well just move into the town hall. I'm just going to be living there. So if you would do like an alternate situation where it's in person 1 month and then maybe Zoom the next month, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Or maybe, in person on a quarterly basis. But of course I work for you folks, so whatever you want, I'll figure out how to make it work.
All right, well, I'll talk to Lori about this some more, and we'll bring this up again at the next meeting, maybe talk about if we do want to start to think about doing this, how frequently would we do it? And, what would our expectation be for Lori as far as being physically present if we're going to meet in person on a fairly regular basis? So we can bring that up. I guess we have to do minutes of the March 21st and April 18th meetings. Let's start with March 21st. Are there any comments or corrections to the March 21st minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the March 21st minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Or a second for that?
Second.
Second.
Julianne?
Aye.
Ashley? You still with us? Tracy?
Aye.
Fran?
Aye.
Gene Kennedy?
Aye.
Gene Cahill?
Aye.
Rick Leaf is aye, and Jen Tolman? Jen still
Aye.
with us?
Aye, yes.
Okay, those minutes are approved. I've got a couple of changes to the April 18th minutes. In the first paragraph on discussion of Adopt a Street Tree Program, it said, Ms. Hurst said she and Ms. Connors met with Mass DOT representatives and received approval of planting in the designated hell strips. Is that the proper terminology for what those things are called?
No, we can change that.
Okay.
We can change that to weedy areas. Or kind of
I think this has to do,
dirt strips.
okay, whatever you want to call that. And the other thing was on page 3, under old new business, letter to Conservation Commission from MPIC. The next to last line, it says, Ms. Davies will collaborate with Ms. Davies on a final draft and forward the result to the conservation agent. I'm sure Ashley could do a great job working with herself, but I'm supposed to say Ms. Cahill will collaborate with Ms. Davies, probably.
What page are you on?
It's page 3, the next to last sentence at the bottom of the page.
Okay, I see it.
Probably says Ms. Cahill will collaborate with Ms. Davies on a final draft. Any
Okay.
other changes or corrections to the April 18th minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the April 18th minutes as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Second.
Julianne?
Aye.
Ashley? Go on here. Tracy?
Aye.
Fran? Jean Kennedy?
Aye.
Jean Cahill?
Aye.
Rick Leaf, aye. Jen Tolman?
Aye.
Okay, that completes that. Is there any other business to come before the committee tonight? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Julianne?
Aye.
Ashley? I keep saying that, she's not with us. Tracy?
Aye. I'm back.
Oh, you're
Due to-
back.
due to
Oh,
time.
thank you. Back in time to adjourn. Tracy?
Aye.
Fran?
Aye.
Jean Kennedy?
Aye.
Jean Cahill?
Aye.
Rick Leaf is aye. And Jen Tolman?
Aye.
Thank you for your forbearance tonight, and we'll get together the third Thursday night in June. Thanks very much, people.
Thank you.
Thank
Aye.
you. Good night all.
And
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Aye.